And my premise is, and this is something also that I've talked with my son about, and this is his philosophy, is that this will become the must. We will come to the point where if we cannot demonstrate human input, the human in the thing, then people will reject it because it's a symbol of a bad past. And I think we as designers, we have to get our shit together and figure out, because nobody has an idea how to do this. Right? I don't know how to do it, but I will tell you, if we don't figure this out, it's going to be we're going to be massively rejected as continuing the paradigm that led to the worst possible of worlds instead of starting a new paradigm, which gets us into maybe the better part of the world.
I don't know if this is for you, but do you want to create iconic products and experiences that people talk about that matter? Then this is for you. Welcome to the podcast Conversations with Roberto. Here I sit down with top entrepreneurs, founders, innovators, designers, and thought leaders, and I'm driven by genuine curiosity. I do my very best to unpack meaningful and actionable insights to help you build iconic products, experiences that matter, and make people talk about you. My name is Roberto Inderbitzin, the founder of Reframe.design, an internationally active and purpose-driven design studio here in Zurich, Switzerland.
Where are you? Where are you at? I'm fine.
In Zurich.
You're in Zurich?
I'm in Zurich.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
That's cool.
So we're not far away.
No. My wife is from Zurich.
No way.
Yeah. I'll be Schweden.
Yep. Just here, just around the corner. Well, it's Switzerland. Everything is around the corner.
Yeah, that's hardly a fair statement.
No, I'm here in Zurich, and I actually did, that was 2010. I did my master's here in the ZHDK. And there was a person that you may know. Hannes. Yeah.
Right. Okay, yeah.
So I did my master's with Hannes.
Yeah. That's cool. I was there for his graduation.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
he did, I think, the year after me.
Okay. All right. Yeah, Hannes is very, very correct.
Yeah, and I remember looking at his sketchbooks and they were just drawing the whole time. And he's like, "Yep, I have that from Chris." Like, all right.
Yeah, I keep telling him, take notes. There's going to be a test afterwards. Hannes himself is quite an interesting character. Very, very intelligent, very learned, very insightful, very, very good at putting associations together and drawing in from different sources. I mean, he's the kind of person you really need in strategic positions. Somebody's got to bring some intelligence into marketing. That's good.
Yeah, designers and marketing, it's quite a I'm a designer by myself, so it's like, it's fun.
Most people think that designers have it with engineers, but it really isn't true. It's more the marketing guys that are the issue.
Yeah, pretty much.
Glad you could do it at this time. This works out a lot better for me.
No, that's great. I mean, like I said, when I have a kid, so she's up 7, so I'm already up.
I mean,
so that's good.
If you have kids, then you're up at 5, so there you go. You can sleep in.
I mean, I would love to know how your brain works, because it's so fascinating to listen to your talks and how you explain things. Always with this feeling of curiosity, or always reframing stuff and looking at it from different angles. So
anyway,
it gets lost by a lot of people as designers.
I don't know. I think I really understood a lot about creative processes or how we even approach them or things until I got out of the corporate framework. The corporate framework has on it so many heavy channeling phenomenon. You have to be channeled down this thought, you have to be channeled down this one, channeled down that one. It's very, very difficult to find a moment to step out of that and say, what exactly is happening here? And probably a lot of my education in that sense happened after I left BMW. BMW was a very good school for how management and large companies work with design and stuff like that, and how car design plays a role in all of that. But actually the creative process and where it could go and things like this didn't really find a space to work, I think, when I was at BMW, because I had so many other loads on top of it. Once I got rid of those, I could look at other things.
Yeah, because, I mean, it must have been a tremendous pressure at BMW.
Yeah, I was talking to a design director the other day who's new in his role, right? He called me up for some advice, kind of like mentor kind of advice. And he's moving from a studio chief up to a design directorship role of a brand. And not a small one either. Okay, this isn't like some, a startup Chinese company where you are responsible for the brand, but the whole thing is so small that it may as well be just a studio, right? We're talking about a well-established brand. And he's moving to this role, and he was asking me some questions about it. And I told him that, this is going back to the theme of stress and pressure. I said, this is not like any other job, not at all. It is not a studio designer's role with another 0 behind it, like just that times 10. It's not that at all. Your tasks are completely different. But not only that, your approach to the product is different. When you are a studio director, you have to identify with what you're doing. You have to put a lot of thought into it from a sense of, I believe in this, and this represents my studio, represents me, et cetera, like that. This is okay. When it starts spreading out to a scale like you're dealing with when you're a design director of a large thing, then you have to do that much more intensely, but across a much wider spectrum of products, and many which will never see the light of day, because you have to keep all these guys alive, all these things somehow valid in your head, etc. Which means that the space for your own self becomes smaller and smaller and smaller until maybe you disappear. And I could see that coming. And I think it's unlike the stress in another job where you're under pressure, you have to perform and have to deliver, and there's quarterly reports and money, whatever, right? This is the kind of pressure that is happening because you're dissolving yourself to make the job work. It's like I have to do this by immersing myself slowly in a bath of acid, okay? Until finally you're just a vapor. That's all you are, right?
The Terminator's like.
Yeah, a little bit like that. Interesting. Thank you. And you could see this coming. And if you, in my day, when I look back at many of the people who were, design directors that I knew, they all, not almost all of them, but almost all of them ended really badly. Okay, like seriously badly. And with grave psychological issues and sometimes violence and definitely destructive on family and things like that. And so that realization was very, very important for my decision to leave BMW when I was 45. I said, I'll manage this by the time I'm 50. Didn't manage by the time I'm 50, but came close. I left it at 52. But that stress that this guy's walking into, he has no idea what's coming at him, because you cannot see this happening.
Hey, sorry for the interruption. If you're enjoying this podcast, please share with others. That's going to help us reach more exceptional guests like Chris. For updates, visit conversations.design and subscribe to our newsletter. That way, you're the first one to know when the next show is going to drop. I appreciate your time and your support. But let's go back to the show.
So it's good to be aware of it. And I gave him a lot of advice on how this should go like this. So that's...
But still, that there's like the pinnacle of wanting to be like those guys. I think it's still sure. Like, even if it's the pressure, it's immense, you still want to be there.
Yeah, of course. Of course, you're not going to turn the job down. You're not going to turn the job down. It's kind of the right stuff. Everybody thinks the action is not going to happen to me.
No, I'm way too smart for that.
Exactly. Yeah.
How did you, I would love to know about your upbringing and how your mind was molded at a young age to be curious, to be unafraid and always trying to break rules. Comics for your portfolio, that's one thing. But even before of that, it would be interesting to know that.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun, actually. That was actually a lot of fun. I wish I'd started it earlier.
Yeah, it's comics.
That's what we're doing now. We're doing comics now, I didn't send you a link to
I want to definitely go into that.
Oh, okay. Anyway.
I definitely want to go into that. That's fascinating. I love the movies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've told people about my background and history and my parents who were very much doers. And I had a school system which was very supportive for, let's say, hands-on stuff. I had a printing shop where I learned to run a Heidelberg press when I was like 17 or 6, something like this. And this is cool because you're given responsibilities of things which are tangible. You have to actually produce doing that. And so that was very helpful. It gave me some confidence that I could do stuff physically. The not drawing, I had no confidence in that, but at least making things, it's helpful in that. But along the way, I would be influenced by things. It actually occurred to me not so long ago to remember when I was trying to learn to ski. Okay, I learned to ski when I was like 16 or 17 or something like this. Wisconsin's got fantastic Alps, I have to tell you. Put Switzerland to shame. The whole hill that you're sitting on there is like bigger than the mountain that I learned to ski on. Okay, so the Uetliberg, right? Is bigger than that, right?
Yeah, right.
So anyways, I was reading this magazine as a kid on skiing because I was totally into it, right? And they were talking about some young guy who was the toast of the ski circuit and how his whole approach was to do whatever they told him to do, he did the reverse. Like if they said put the weight on the downhill leg, he would put it on the uphill leg. If they said lean in, he'd lean out. I don't know, all that stuff, right? And I can remember reading this thinking, yes, that's so cool. This like natural approach to things. If they say it all goes right, you're just naturally going to go left. Because somehow... reflecting on it, I think that opened up a piece of my mind that said, if this guy was very successful doing that, then maybe that's a strategy I can adopt.
Right. Seems to be working.
Yeah, you know how that is. It works sometimes. Sometimes you have to, it's knowing when to conform and knowing when not to, or at least feeling instinctively I can go with that. That's a different animal.
Yeah, but how did you get the confidence? I mean, let's say to get into a prestigious school, you have to conform, but at the end, it's like, no, I don't want to conform because I need to stand out. To have this balance and to have the confidence, like, you know what, I'm still going to go all in and want to do it. Or was it let's see what happened?
No. I was just thrilled. I had no idea really what I was going to do. So the closest thing I could imagine I would become was a minister. Okay, so I went to my church and I talked to them and they said, fine, you just have to do these courses first. So while I was doing those is when I applied to Art Center, because I didn't even know about Art Center hardly until then. I mean, this kind of stuff, a designer was not a known job. Okay? But I like drawing cars and I like cars. And I thought that would be kind of cool. And so I found out about the school a little bit. I sent a portfolio and amazingly enough was accepted. So I was still in this kind of euphoria of, oh my God, right? Okay, so I get there and had the great fortune to find an apartment with people ahead of me in the school who can take you through it, help you through it, which is fundamental to how that school works. So, my roommate was Ed Golden, who you may know of. I mean, he's a real famous car designer. He worked for lots of companies, lots of things at Ford. But before that, Volkswagen and stuff. And he's a real cut up of a guy. But he's also a really good taskmaster. Okay, so he's really good at like, no, you don't go to bed. You get back out on the bloody drawing board and you finish this thing. Right? There is no.
Oh, that's cool.
There is no.
Oh, that's amazing to have somebody like
that. Yeah. You have to have roommates like that, right? Okay, but anyway, within the first 3 months, I was so convinced I wouldn't cut it. I can remember, being on a payphone, calling my mother and saying, "I have to get out of here. I can't do this." And she said, "We paid for it. You're going to stay there, guys." Okay. I mean, it was they're really tough. It's like a boot camp. It was back then. Now, because of all kinds of strange pressures, they've had to slack off.
Things like more like.
Well, perversely enough, as far as I understand it, the university accreditation system rates universities on how many students they lose. And if they lose students, it's considered bad. At Art Center, when I was there, it was considered good. It was a mark of quality of the school if they chuck people out. Okay.
Yeah.
And when that switched to like chucking people out will mean we lose our accreditation, it changed entirely the phenomenon. I'm not really sure how that mechanism works, so I don't want to say exactly, but I certainly got the opinion in later years that they didn't have that sense of hardcore, you hack it or you're out, like they did in my day.
I think here it's the same, like if they got money from the government, from the students that actually graduate. So the incentive is like to have more students, which is, it dilutes the whole, and still we don't have work for them.
Yeah, right. That might work in academia and things like this, but it doesn't work in design which is probably why design schools along the way, I mean, Art Center always said it's a trade school, it's a vocational school. We always understood it as that. But along the way, they've had to like lay on so much technical stuff for the kids. I mean, they spend all their time just figuring out how to learn the latest edition of this, that, or the other computer program, right? Yeah. That design as an intellectual phenomenon is taught, but there's no space in here for these kids to hold that, right?
No, you can't.
There's just no space. As you know, you had to go back into the school, right? The one in Zurich, right? And that's where you begin, your mind is a bit freer, some things, you're a bit more confident with other things, and you can absorb that. I think there's a role for a graduate school approach to design, but what I've seen now, maybe with the exception of the one you and Hannes went to, the one I've seen now is in other schools, it's kind of like the same thing, but older students, right? They don't approach it from a different intellectual point of view. Right. Is that my experience?
Yeah. I mean, I was lucky that I did an apprenticeship as a polymechanic. It's to learn on how to mill, how to program robots, and how to draw CAD and all that stuff. And then I went into starting industrial design. So I think that's cool. It's a great approach to have something before you go into industrial design or design as well. So you learn how to work pretty much, like not being just a student, but to really work, to have like the tasks and to focus more on the time that you have.
Also, I've noticed now here with some of the young students I work with that the concept of a portfolio has not evolved very much from where it was in my day. It's just changed content-wise, but not really conceptually evolved. And probably that's due for a rethink as well. Just how is it you demonstrate your value? How is that I convince you that I'm the right person for you? Yeah. But I mean, the car industry is still car guys trying to get car guys in. So I mean, that business is a little bit difficult to modify.
Yeah, but I don't think that's going to work. I mean, I don't know I mean, I would love to know your take on that.
What, the car guy thing?
Yeah, the car guy thing, designing for the car guys and teaching the car guys to be car guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's what's dead ending that whole business, is because it's very difficult for, let's say, a theme sector. I don't say profession, let's say a theme sector, to be self-critical when they have no communication. There's no professional publications on design. There are no treaties, car design. There are no, there's no debates on it. Everybody's in a corporate shell, so they can't say a single thing negative. They always have to toe the corporate line. You're never going to get two people in a room and say honestly what they think. You got to read between the lines. And every time you hear a design director and they say, "What do you think of this car?" and they say, "Oh, I haven't seen it yet," then he thinks it sucks, right? That kind of stuff. You got to read between the lines and all this stuff. If they say, well, you actually have to see it outside to really understand. Then it really sucks. And an army of photo retouchers couldn't save it. Right? I mean, because of this culture of being very correct and not offending anybody within your own company, it doesn't allow for critical thought, right? And without critical thought, this entire agency just goes away, right? So what happens is you have basically that same lack of critical thought being repeated at another level. Just to give an example, I was recently invited to be a judge in a car design thing. Okay, so they sent a bunch of stuff to look at, and I told them that, in my opinion, there should be no winners this year. There should be no winners, because by giving a winner, because you have to, you are reinforcing the idea to young people everywhere that you think this is good, and that's what the standard should be. I mean, if you think of the Chopin competition, they went like 15 years without a winner. 15 years they went with no winner because there was no one worthy of it. So, I mean, at least that's what I read. Yeah. So, I mean, have you ever imagined a car design competition where they say, you know what, sorry, come back, do better? And it doesn't happen. And until that type of, approach begins to change, and until we ask more complex questions, then let's say the overriding evolutionary forces, aerodynamics have to be like this, manufacturing has to be like this, and blah, 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 are just going to, continue to pile up until the actual maneuvering room for design is going to be left down to just whatever you can sculpt in the icing on the cake.
Yeah, I think that's in so many professions. That's what's happening at the moment. Like it's just the standard. It's just going down, slow. I remember I had a teacher once. I did the drawing and sketching with markers. I killed my markers with that. And he looked at me. He's like, "You know what? This is a design school. This is not an art school." It just killed me. I was like, "Okay, that hurt, but that's what I needed to hear. That was exactly what I needed to hear." And yeah, that helped me. Well, and sometimes I feel that if you tell the student or to tell the people that's not good, their feelings get hurt, and that's a bad thing. And they don't learn from that. It's like, "Oh, I got hurt." But
yeah, it's not hurt you don't want to be destructive to be destructive. It has to be
absolutely
constructive destruction like that. But I don't know. I mean, I got standards beat into me when I was at Art Center that I still can't live up to, and so I'm very frustrated when I can't draw correctly, or I make the paper dirty or smudgy, or I put a finger mark in it or something stupid like this, right? Mm-hmm. And when your entire time you're spent inside a computer. I was talking to somebody the other day looking at their work, and I realized this person has never understood perspective. Perspective is only what the computers told them it is. Actually, to stand outside of that and see what is happening here had never been a part of the teaching process. Well, that's interesting. Yeah, because, right now, these things, they just take over, right? The computer set it up and suddenly you're rotating it around and it's defining things like that. Right. So, yeah.
So we should go back to...
But, I mean, it only shows up when problems occur. And then you go, well, why is that a problem there?
Well, yeah. But going back to your education, I mean, the drawing, like the smudging and all that stuff. I mean, don't you think that has also to do with you drawing calligraphy on Bibles? Like, I mean, you have to be very...
Oh, you know all those stories, huh? You know all those stories, huh? Well, no, I don't know. I think I was pretty messy. I mean, calligraphy, I did a lot of it when I was a kid, and it's very frustrating because the inks are a mess, and I never learned how to work a brush. I'm doing a map now. You can see that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, cool.
This is a map, wow. And I am actually doing it with a brush, pens and a brush, right? So I'm trying to reteach myself how to use ink and a brush. But when I was at Art Center, the first courses you have to take are in charcoal, and charcoal's totally unforgiving, absolutely unforgiving. Mm-hmm. And it's the kind of courses where they will talk this much about what you've drawn and this much about how messy the paper is, or they'll flip it over on the backside and look at the smudges on the backside of it and take you apart for that shit. And you really learn okay, let's be careful about this kind of stuff like this.
Mhm.
But that doesn't mean you can walk the talk. I mean, I still make messes. I did this. I always do painting when I'm on vacation. So we were just on vacation down in Sorrento. It's a beautiful area. And I thought, okay, I got this watercolor paper, I'll just very carefully mask it off here like that and do this whole thing. So I get the painting about 75% done. And then very carefully peel off the masking, right? Which, as I'm doing it, it very carefully ripped the entire upper surface of the painting away. And I'm like, okay, lesson learned on that one. Chris, don't forget to test the paper before you apply the tape. Okay, yeah. Okay.
Oh,
Next.
Right. Oh, that's what
Of course, that reminds me of a story with my son. I always used to tell him, first law of design is what? Never throw away anything. Never throw away a sketch. You can always save every sketch, right? So I should have saved this drawing, right? Okay, I was always beating into him, don't throw away any artwork. You can always save it. Don't throw away anything. Then one day, for a completely other reason, I said to him, well, don't forget, you know what the first rule of engineering is? And he looked at me and said, throw away everything? He was about 10 at the time or something. Throw away everything.
Oh, so cool.
Yeah, it was cute.
You're like,
yeah, maybe not so far off, Anyway.
Yeah, designers and engineers.
Yeah.
I mean, talking about designers and engineers, I mean, you brought the project, what's it called?
Deep
Blue.
Deep Blue,
right? And weren't you the first one to actually bring together designers and engineers in the car world or world?
Well, I don't think I was the first person in the car world to do that, but let's put it this way. They were under a huge amount of we gave them a ton of leash, and said, we're just totally hands off. We're not going to micromanage this one. You're going to do this yourselves. And it failed. And pretty dramatically, that concept, which I had no idea why until later. And then I realized that, engineers need something to actually engineer. When they're starting from zero, they're putting themselves in the role of a designer. Doesn't mean they can't do it as human beings. They have skill sets as well. I mean, they're creative as well. I'm not saying that there's some kind of miracle division between these two groups. However, normally what they are tasked to do is solve problems, right? Designers are tasked to create problems. We make problems and engineers solve the problems, right? And when you're starting a project like that and you're asking both sides to create the problem, the engineers, they just choked, right? And they had nowhere to go. So that was one of the interesting outcomes on that. And it's not that these people were not creative or basically has an engineering degree that couldn't do this. It's because the way we had formulated it was putting them on equal territory without understanding that they understood their roles as being different. That's why the designers had no problems. They filled a car full of drawings and ideas and stuff like they had no problems at all with that. And the engineers just literally choked. What was good in the project was the engineers had, as you know the story, the engineers told the designers, listen, if you present all your stuff and we don't, we're going to walk from this project. You're going to embarrass us so bad, we're just going to walk. And the designers, to their credit, said, okay, we prioritize the cooperation on this project over showing how brilliant we are to our boss, right? And so they did not show me what they had done. And so I took them apart for being a bunch of lazy bastards, right? Spending the goddamn company money, and I freaking took them apart for that. So that was a, all around very interesting project from a human point of view. The actual result of the project, I thought, was it came out later, far downstream what the results were, and it was excellent, right? But at that moment, I wanted to throttle all of them.
Yeah, I can imagine that. But that's tough. But it's also it shows living together, being submerged together, what can come out of it, the loyalty. Okay.
Yeah, at that point in the project, they were not co-located at that point in the project. At that point in the project, the German engineers were all in Germany. And the design team was pretty much all in America. And I think the engineering team, I said German engineering, it was international, but let's say it was a BMW engineering team and they stayed in Germany. And then they came out and the idea was we're supposed to, compare what you found, right? And that didn't work. So after that, we co-located the remainder of the team in California.
Okay, so you brought everything together.
Yeah. I mean, there were already some of the engineering guys into their design team there, but at the end of the day, the ones in California turned out to be the core group of everything.
Okay. Did that work? Did you took those learnings for later for Rolls-Royce?
Yeah, of course. No, immediately afterwards, there were other projects, but then downstream was Rolls-Royce as well. And I think they were all good experiences in me learning to let go, also learning to give these guys leash, learning to allow them a lot of autonomy, which they worked with and they did well with. And every once in a while, the team calls up and says, you know what, Chris, you have to shoot your own dog. This guy that you put in here is not right. He's not working. But you put him there. So you have to shoot your own dog. And you don't like to make anybody's day hell, but sometimes you have to do that too.
How did you manage that? I mean, how did you manage the pressure? I mean, I cannot imagine. I mean, still, you had your family, then you have like brands, not just one brand, but different brands. And the brands have like different objects, categories, and you got a lot of post-it notes on the wall. Or
oh yeah. Well, again, I think I was slowly but surely learning this lesson of letting go. A few years ago, I'd say maybe about 5 years after I left BMW, Anders Warming came down to see me. Right? Anders, who's now head of Rolls-Royce, one of my guys from back then, great guy. Anyway, he comes down to see me here in Italy, and he says, "God, Chris, you really look good." I said, "Well, thank you." He says, "No, I'm telling you that because before you looked like shit. I mean, you look horrible, right? So now you look at least normal, right?" And I mean, I think one of the key things of design directors is they should get out of the way. I think this idea that we take design directorship into such an aging position is maybe not a good idea. I think this should be put into young people's hands. I kind of admire the military in that sense. Part of my family is in the military in America, right? Or they were. And I learned how some of those structures work, right? And their structures work on calendars, right? So, for instance, you can't be the captain of a ship forever because they have to get you out of there so they can get the next generation comes up. Otherwise, you have what happens is like what happened, I think before World War II, you wind up with the upper officer structure being all these old guys. And when they're killed off or hurt or there's something, whatever happens, you have nobody in between with any experience, right? So you've got this huge gulf. And so the point with the military was, when you have all these officers who stay in this job forever, they become really old. If something happens, no experience, right? You haven't got people who've raced through the ranks, right? It's just an enormous gap. So they changed that for a type of an obligatory, you're in, and then at this date, you're out. Even if you're doing a great job. I don't know how many years it is, but let's say you're in there for a few years as a captain of a ship or whatever, but then you have to be out, because they need the next generation. And along the way, they have policies of raising the young officers through these, where you have to spend time and know every piece of the ship. You have to spend time on the helm. Even if you're brand new out of the academy, there's going to be a moment in your very first time in there where the captain sits back and says, "Okay, you're in charge of the ship. You dock it." Super stressed, very compact, very small. Now you dock it, right? And et cetera, like this. And you have to take exams and, you have to do these tests, et cetera. They're very, what do you want? A lot depends on these guys doing their job right? But what I kind of admire in it is they understand that they are in a continuum, okay? It's a continuum. And so they prioritize continuum. Now, you talk about the way car brands see themselves. Parts of the brand, let's say the shareholder value side, the administrative side, see themselves as a continuum, right? Whereas many other parts of it see it as, this kind of punctuated equilibrium. It was all boring until I came along, and now I will make it interesting. And then it can be boring again after I'm gone. And therefore, they have to stay in to make sure that interesting stays interesting and it doesn't get, rejected by the guy after them and blah, 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 blah. And what happens is you wind up with a lot of young people frustrated because there's no career movement. I mean, come on, this career ladder is not all that big, right? In a car company. And so you begin this proliferation of little studios to give somebody a job to do and all kinds of crap like that. I think the general health of the system there needs to have an outlet where, as people mature in their careers, they find another role in companies, in their lives, and whatever, and get out of the way for these young people.
Do you think that's also why a lot of companies are making their own little studios, and big companies are coming, for example, to you, for example, in the Chinese market for Reds, like the Reds project? Why they came to you instead of having internal designers?
Well, in that particular case, Reds was a startup inside of a big Chinese company that didn't do cars, right? And so they created inside themselves a startup specifically to do cars. And they came to us with this idea to do this little car. And I said, why don't you go up to Pininfarina? They're right up the street. They really do good work, because what you want to do is not really what I'm interested in. And they said, well, what are you interested in? I said, I would like to do something the right way. Are you interested in doing something the right way? Now, what does the right way mean? Well, the right way means don't think about cars as you know them. Think about the problem. Think about the issues. Think about what you want to have happen. Think about what makes people happy. Let's start from that. Let's forget about everything we know about cars. Just start with that. And they said they liked that idea. And so they stayed with with us for years. We worked on that project for maybe 2.5 years before we did a single sketch of what the car could look like. Yeah, really. We spent all the time trying to figure out how you sit in it, and how you get in and out, and how you'd want to talk to people in it, where you change the diaper on your baby, all kinds of stuff like this. The whole idea that we approach the car from the 90% of the time when it's not moving instead of the 10% of the time when it's moving was pretty radical thought departure. And because they had said, yeah, we're in on that, and we sign off on that, and they were okay as a client. I don't think many other companies would be willing to do that. Now, when we work with car companies, it's far more advising them on the way their decision processes go, and if they've understood all the alternatives and things. It's less about whether this styling is correct or that styling is correct.
Yeah, but to have 2 years or 2.5 years before having a sketch or something, it shows the trust.
Yeah, or the pace of the project, one of the two. Well, I mean, there was a lot of on-agains, off-agains in that one. But however, what was interesting, in the meantime, after the project started, 1, 2, 3, if not 4, because I can't remember exactly when she had her kid. Let's say 3 or 4 of the ladies in our team had their first child during this project, right? And when you've got this many people, I mean, we're a small group, we're like 8 people, right? When you've got that many people thinking about children, thinking about a baby, talking about a baby, what it means, suddenly they have a child, dealing with a child, baby first time, right? It colors your idea of what's right, what's important in the world. You're not like fixated on acceleration and top speed and horsepower. You're thinking of completely other issues. And I think that was a godsend to have the women in the studio be in that part of their lives at that moment for that project, because it certainly impacted all of us in a positive manner.
Right. No,
you can see some of the pictures of it. We're sitting in the car mock-ups. I'm sitting there talking to some of them, and you can tell it's right before the child's going to be born. Right.
Yeah, it just really shifts the perspective. And I mean, our child is 3 years old.
Yeah,
our girl. And that everything can be a toy. And as a designer, it's like, I can make a toy here. I can do this. It's like you see the different angles. And I love it. And then you have like your 3D printers. Like, I can print something for the toys. And it's like so cool.
That is fantastic. 3-year-olds is really great. Yeah. Now because it becomes an evolving person. And more their own person. And that moment when you realize they are their own person and they're not, what you think
have their own mind.
They have their own mind. Yeah. Well, that's a really cool moment. Kind of like a car. Actually, cars are like that too. You get to a certain point in the design and you know what? This thing is on its own. It has its own mind. Reds was like that. I think at the beginning, it was fairly unformed. When Reds began to actually take form, I have to give Pietro Nume, but especially Matteo Mariuzzo credit for what they did. What he did on the exterior on this thing. He conceived the car, I think, as the car channeled through him and not imposing some preconceived idea on it. I mean, for sure, Matteo never did a sketch of Reds in his portfolio and then, finally, I'm in a company and I can make the car of my dreams. No, it was not that at all. Nobody had ever drawn a car that weird before.
And brought it out.
Yeah, which goes back, if you don't mind, which goes back to this theme of what is the difference between a design director and a studio chief. I think in my role as a design director, that's how I handled that project, even though it was just a single project, right? Because you have to learn to trust yourself in that role. Yeah, there's a phrase you used to hear all the time in BMW. Trust is good, control is better. Maybe you know this phrase too. It's a very Northern European phrase. Trust is good, but control is better. And I have come to realize, and I believe in Reds it was applied, that actually the trust, you have to evolve in yourself. You have to trust yourself to be able to deal with what your team gives you. Not that I trust the team because I've whipped them into shape and I've beaten them to the point where they have no other ideas than my own. No, you give them independence. But you trust yourself to be able to deal with it because you can find the right thing in what they've created. Because I will guarantee you, they will do much better and more creative work than you were ever able to extrapolate out of yourself if you deal with them as extended wrists, right? So in that particular case, Matteo has started to take us down roads where literally no one had ever seen before, right? And Pietro as well. I mean, I have to get the two of them worked very strong together at the very beginning. And they were giving us cars which changed radically as you walked around them. Can you imagine a car whose windshield from one angle is vertical and from the next angle it's inverted? How does that work? Right? Yeah, so cool. Instead of telling them, I want this car to be like that, I found myself really energized by what they were giving me because it forced me to reconceive things so that this worked because it was too cool not to work. And so that's one of those lessons that design directors have to continuously reinforce in themselves is learn to trust themselves.
You were younger when you were at BMW and you had the pressure. So you didn't have the time to develop or to look at from that angle. Is that also a thing? Or
great advantage at BMW in those days. In those days, they had huge budget potential. And so I could try stuff out, seriously, you could try stuff out. Yeah. When you walk into a new team, you don't know who these people are. Right off the bat, I gave everybody a full-size model to do. Almost everybody. I mean, we did tons of full-size models, tons and tons. And in fact, if you go back into the history books, my son Derek, who's very much involved in design history, knows all this stuff and design thinking. He's a source of a lot of my inspiration now because of what he knows about design. Was pointing out to me as we were going through this history book of Pininfarina, how many cars they did in a single year back in the 50s. Okay, like in a single year, dozens and dozens of different cars would be pumped out of a single studio. I think if you go back into Michelotti's days, you will find Michelotti's doing like 30 cars at a car show or something like that. Insane numbers. Wow. Okay, what this is as Derek puts it, they are at-bats. This is the phrase which is used in baseball in America, which means the number of times you get up and have a chance to swing at the ball, right? You never get good at it if you don't have those opportunities. Unless you've actually been at-bat, you can't develop skills which will make you a home run hitter, right? So what happened back in those days, they were giving their designers so many at-bats that even if they came up with a couple of losers, they were training their teams into huge amounts of quality or higher quality because of just the amount of experience. Today, with these hyper-restricted budgets, this whole thing about efficiency and everything like that, we expect these young guys to learn on their first model, do a winning design and get it out in 3D without giving them this opportunity to develop and make mistakes and learn. And this is what clay does, or this is what a 3D milling does for you. And I think the car companies have completely screwed up their idea of the proportions of price performance, price Leistung, cost to performance, by thinking that by shaving a design budget down and getting rid of the quote unquote waste, they are improving their overall structure. And they're not. Design within a car company is a fraction of the budget of a new car. A fraction. Okay. So by cutting down on your own training ability, your own ability to be good, because it can only happen on a full size, you are shooting yourself in the foot for your future.
So it's like sharpening the axe instead of like the saying that if you want to cut the tree, like sharpen it 90% of the time or 95% of the time, sharpen the axe and then cut the tree.
Yeah, exactly.
In this case, it's just reverse.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've seen what's happened because I know people in the business, who are in roles that I had and dealing with, what it means to run a studio, or what it means to run budgets and stuff like that. And they're under huge pressure to cut corners, get it down to one model, that kind of stuff. Don't even do a full size. I mean, there are studios where these designers never do that. I remember being told a story not so long ago, by a design chief who was running an all virtual studio, right? Everything virtual, right? And he said, these kids coming out of school really disappointed and wanted to leave. And I said, why? Kind of the logic would be they're grown up in the screen. They've grown up in a virtual world. They should be really comfortable with it. And he said, no, because they've dreamed all their life of doing something physical, tangible, and full scale. And here I'm saying, no, it's just an extension of how we did in school. And that's really disappointing. And that's what first time I started to think about what is the role of the full size, right? And then, as I said, Derek brought up the fact when we were studying the history of Pininfarina. I bring the company up because I had to do a speech about the Cisitalia, which is a very famous car from them. And, and they'd very nicely given me one of their history books, and you can see how many cars they did back then. And that's when Derek brought up the fact that car designers today are just not doing it.
Yeah, it's such a difference if you have a scale model of design instead of just a little like a full-time scale model or a scale model. Such a difference.
Yeah, there's difference in all these things. Right? You have to work. In fact, there's difference in materials. I never got a lot of sympathy when I was in Germany for doing plaster models, because that's what I grew up on in Fiat, right? But when I did send people every once in a while down to Italy to do a plaster model, they really appreciated it because it's a completely different medium and it gives you a completely different effect. I mean, not so often you can stand on the hood of your car and look at it, right? But it's a really nice perspective point.
Well, you can do it now with the whole 3D and virtual reality.
Yeah.
But it's still not the same.
If you believe that, right? No, it's not the same. That's not the same.
I mean, I like.
You were talking about skill sets from calligraphy, right? One of the things they teach you in calligraphy is how to draw a letter, right? So you don't draw letters like this, right? Okay, you draw them from the get-go with a mass, right? And you learn to do it like this. Well, when you're doing a plaster model, you can't put tape on it because the tape won't stick to wet plaster. The plaster stays wet for, I don't know, maybe a century. Like it's guaranteed when you paint the car, show it right away, because 2 days later there's going to be bubbles on it, right? So because you can't draw a line with tape, you have to learn to draw a line that you can see from a distance, which is thick, right? With a greasy pencil. And so you wind up drawing a line all the way down the side of a car like that, down 3.5 meters of car, right? I got really good at that.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah, plaster is really cool.
When you were used to do some, no, I wouldn't say tedious, but repetitive work.
Yeah, calligraphy, that's it. Well, actually, I like graphics and things like that because you turn your mind off, right? When you're doing it, you just zen right out.
Right.
And it lets the other half of the brain or whatever go wherever it wants. That's kind of cool, actually.
It's kind of like drawing cartoons, I guess, when you get into it. Or is it like, do you get into the flow when you?
Yeah.
When you're drawing your comics.
Yeah. You can really get into it. But storyboards are a lot of fun to do. I was just looking around here. I do for the team. I do a lot of storyboards. We put animators into the studio. I will tell you this: this is one subject area where the whole world of car design needs to open their eyes. They need animators in their studio. I mean, basically, putting
Everybody
an
needs
animator.
animators.
Everybody needs animators, right? And
right.
Seriously, they do, because animators understand a visual process in a completely different manner than you and I. Completely different, and they understand motion picture making from a completely different process. And only when you get into seeing things through their eyes and how they see things, you realize the potential that's there for creativity to open up new avenues in whatever it is you're doing. And so I really recommend that. Anyway, so the animators here, they appreciate it when I do some storyboards of stuff. And so I like to do them too. So that's kind of also what I'm sitting in the middle of, a bunch of storyboards.
Talking about animations, now let's go into that field.
Woohoo!
Because that's so fascinating.
We're going to be there. Yeah, there we go. Yeah,
it's going to be soon.
This is what I did during COVID. Yeah, this was my COVID work. Yeah.
Some other people were doing Netflix and and then you have Chris Bangle doing a whole universe.
Yeah, it's another thing that took me down avenues I never expected to go down. And I will say this has been maybe the most eye-opening thing I've done in years and years.
I mean, I just watched, was it 2 days ago? I watched Shira, because Hannah is like, you have to watch that. I mean, there's no way you shouldn't watch that. There's no way you can understand what's behind it with words without watching that. And
did you enjoy it? Did you like it?
Oh, I loved it. I really loved it. I mean, I love the part like Rocky IV is like, yes, that's the best one. That's the best one. That's the best one.
Wait, say again. It got cut out. What did you say? You loved the part what?
When it says like Rocky IV.
Yeah.
Because that's the best Rocky, in my opinion. So it's like, yes, that's a good one.
Yeah.
No, but like
Shira hacks him up and the 4 becomes a square root of -1.
Right, exactly. Those little details are like amazing. Like that. And
that was great fun.
I don't know. And I love the part that I love the idea of the object not being, always mess up that word, amorphized.
Yeah, anthropomorphized.
And
not being anthropomorphized, yes. Yeah.
Right. That's and the challenge to bring out life in the character or in the object without actually having eyes and hands and
yeah, we presented. There was a junior high school here in Torino, and they had about 70 kids who wanted to do a project on Shira, of all things. Can you imagine that? Mm-hmm. And so they all watched it. And then they got animation programs and they did their own little animations and they wrote stories about it, what happens next and that kind of stuff, or what happened before. And then we went there to give them a talk. They gave us about 3 hours. And in those 3 hours, we had split up the team. My co-writer and co-creator on the animation or the cartoon series, Fiorella, I did a part with the students for about narrative, how narrative is constructed. Matteo and Lucia did a part on how concept art is done. And the 2 animators we have in the studio, Ottavio and Tommaso, they show them how the animation worked. And so we rotated these kids around through it, right? And at a certain point, there was a piece that we showed of a super simplistic animation of a Brooklyn Bridge looking character walking away, because the Brooklyn Bridge has these kind of like 2 pillars, and it just kind of walked away, right? And this girl says, I will never be able to see a bridge again without seeing it walk. And I thought, that's it. That's what I want right there. That's it. We got it. Because the whole reason we're doing this is to offer the opportunity for kids to grow up like car designers, who we all see the world a lot, or designers in general, but specifically car designers. We see everything as alive. You have to deal with it that way. You don't put eyeballs on it to see it alive. You look at gesture, you look at intention, you think about what it wants to be because of what it is, et cetera, et cetera. And so if we can get a little of that across, I mean, in a long format, there's some really fantastic short format ones. Luxo Jr. from Pixar was probably one of the great pieces of it, but it's all short format. Try and keep a narrative going as long as Shira. That's something else.
That's amazing.
I'm glad you liked it. That's
beautiful.
cool.
No, I loved it. I was like, it's difficult to have like a cartoon that I can show to the kid, and it's not like this animals and cars with eyes and all that stuff. And I think she's going to enjoy that. I'm sure.
I hope so.
And if not, I can enjoy it again, watching it again. So
Well, I hope we will have more to be able to show you. I have more to be able to show you. There's one junior high school kid. So here's a kid who's about 12, maybe 13. I don't know. They're in that group, right? 11 to 13, I think. So I don't know which age he was in there, but probably one of those two. He listened to this really intently, listened to everything we said. And then he leaned back in his chair and he said, wow, finally, he said the word, finally, a cartoon with logic, with physics. He said that word, not me. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, all the cartoons are superheroes or magic, and they never really explain anything. And it just happens because it can't. And here, you thought out everything, because we literally did try, as designers would, you try to think out everything. Yeah. And it told me that there's a need for young people to have something to grab onto, which isn't, totally spoon-fed around the entertainment, like we strip away everything that might challenge you or make you think because of that. And to just get down to the core of just what will make you laugh or whatever, cry or whatever. But we take away everything else that might make you think later about something. And then this one, that's kind of part and parcel of it. You can't not have to think about it. So I hope kids like it.
I'm sure. Well, I mean, I like that. So that's already a win.
That's a good start. We start with a parent. That's a good thing. Yeah, we will be showing this down in France in a few weeks. We'll be in Cannes at the MIPCON. It's a huge event. And our producer from America is there. And he's a really, really famous producer. He bought into it. He loved it. When he found out about it, he says, I get it. And our scriptwriter, who comes from a long, long background in cartoons and everything like that. So we'll have a good team.
What's your vision for it, or your goal with the whole universe?
Well, it started out kind of trying to create something that wasn't me. Okay. So literally, seriously, trying to establish something which the team can deal with. There are co-creators on it. The IP, they have a heart and soul in, and it doesn't require my name on the door to bring a client in for money. They can run with this, right? And it is a kind of a quote unquote sustainability project. That's kind of how it started, to see, could we do something which uses the studio's IP, uses our skill sets, so it remains focused here, but can live on and provide a basis for future success and return. We have a responsibility to these people here, so we have to look for that. In the meantime, it turned into something much bigger. Okay, on the one side, we never thought we would be trying to pitch a television show with it. Honestly, we never thought that. But it got so far, and I said, this is really cool. And that happened when literally I sat down and wrote the story. Okay, so this book represents about
the little story.
It's about 1/3 of season 1 of about 4 or 5 seasons. Okay, season being a story arc, not necessarily being a time season, but a story arc. When we were doing this,
I like the
what's
pun.
that? Story.
Yeah, the story.
An arc's arc. When we were starting with Archie, the team said, you have to write the backstory. So actually, the flip side of this book is called the Fabula Rare. And that's the backstory. And it starts, as you would imagine, with the origin of the universe, because we're designers and, we just don't screw around. Right? We're going to go all the way. So this one starts all the way from like where the universe begins and goes all the way down and explains everything, why they exist in their reality and why we exist in ours. So you had to figure all this out. When I did this, with the help of the team, right, it came out that it only works if you establish a completely different relationship between humanity and technology and objects. Completely different. Every other narrative, it's we make the things and they come alive, right? Geppetto makes Pinocchio, and then Blue Fairy, bing, and et cetera, et cetera. Or some magic like in Beauty and the Beast, right? In this particular story, it only works if we are co-created with things. Co-create. That means we share a soul. And in the early days of the universe, we were together with these living things, and now we are separated. And because of that, a piece of our soul is missing, which is why we have this insane fascination for objects and mechanisms and technology and devices. And we have to buy 20 pairs of shoes and everything like this, right? Why? Because a piece of our soul is literally missing. With them, they don't have our piece, which is basically sex, love, romance. And so they're all closet romantics, right? Because they're missing that piece. Okay, in doing this, right, and creating this, setting this whole thing up, it requires a different approach to physics. What is the universe made of? What are the building blocks of the universe, et cetera, et cetera? Okay, so it turns out a couple of years ago, a young guy who's one of these real tech geniuses, young millionaire startup guy, all these things, he found out about this, read this, and said, actually, this could be a completely different basis for ethical AI, completely different basis. No one has ever approached it from that fundamentally different philosophical purpose. And so we actually are now, what you see behind me is some of the work that we're doing now on the idea, can we create a structure for ethical AI based on this approach to humanity and technology? It's very, very interesting. So I never thought it'd go that way. And along the way, while you're doing this, you realize, you know what, there's about a bazillion lessons learned for design in this, a bazillion. Yeah. And this has been mind expanding in ways I never would have thought.
Oh, it's a rabbit hole. Because we have the responsibility to build something that's not trash. And as a designer, you're still building something. But I'm still not convinced that we need to build a product. We can build an experience. And if you think it from a perspective of an object being alive and not just being like you mentioned, it's a co-creation or co-living with each other. It's a completely different animal.
Yeah. Well, you know about this theory of 2E that I preach, right? Panos, I'm sure, has told you about that.
The
second existence, 2E.
Second existence.
Okay. And that's basically a philosophy that everything should have a multiple existence. It doesn't just get ground up again. You turn it into something else. That aligns very much with the philosophical concept of this narration because it imposes the idea that purposes evolve. And so in our story, one of the characters is an egg beater and he dreams to evolve into a helicopter. That's what he wants to be, right? If he can someday. Because if you think about it, kind of like similar mechanisms, whirling and stuff like this. Right? So that's what he wants. That's what he wants to be.
We wouldn't do it as a kid, just turn around. It's just like...
Exactly, right? So if you take that all the way to a design philosophy and say, okay, what happens if we don't design everything for single life? We design it for multiple. That means you have to kind of go back in time and say, okay, or forward in time, however you want to do it, and say, all right, how do I design this from that perspective? Which means it may be suboptimal for the first use, but in the overall run, it's optimal. And what I like about this is it requires us to take stuff apart so that it can have another use. Right? It's not just we build stuff, right? We can take it apart. And the whole philosophy developed because I was asked one time by the German government to give a little talk on the future of man-machine coexistence. And I worked with a BMW robotics engineer on if robots and machines, they put stuff together better than people ever could, what is the one thing people do that maybe they don't do so well? And of course, besides service industry and stuff like that, one of the things that people do really well is take stuff apart. It's very unexpected. You don't know what to expect next. It's very inaccurate. So those two things, inaccuracy and improvising, are two things which are maybe more towards our end of the spectrum than the machines. Okay, eventually machines can do anything if you want them to.
Yeah.
But if you protect that system with credits, you put something together, you can only do it if your company buys credits from companies that hire people to take things apart. That's how Tesla got started with the gold credits for zero emissions. You could create a reverse manufacturing industry where people were in nice, clean manufacturing environments and not these shitty recycling places where, down in Africa, they're stripping the insulation off the copper by burning it off or some crap like this, right? No, you give people exactly, right? No, you give people real clean working environments with a job with some sort of security in it, but it's not repetitive, mundane. It is, everything's different, every moment different, right? But that only works if design is able to convince people that stuff that is suboptimal from the previous philosophy is actually optimal for a human-based long-term resource use. And my premise is, and this is something also that I've talked with my son about, and this is his philosophy, is that this will become the must. We will come to the point where if we cannot demonstrate human input, the human in the thing, then people will reject it because it's a symbol of a bad past. And I think we as designers, we have to get our shit together and figure out, because nobody has an idea how to do this. I don't know how to do it, but I will tell you, if we don't figure this out, it's going to be we're going to be massively rejected as continuing the paradigm that led to the worst possible of worlds instead of starting a new paradigm, which gets us into maybe the better part of the world.
Right. Wow. Yeah. And
did you expect that the conversation to go there?
Sense.
Me neither.
Let me just go like that part of thinking about products and how it works, and it makes sense in a way that recycling, if you look at it, it's like doesn't make sense.
No.
Taking it apart and just reusing it, it's a bit okay, but
grinding it up, turning it back to the raw materials. I mean, it's one thing to fish the raw materials out of the sea, out of the plastic crap. That's fantastic. I'm nothing against that. But the idea that when we're done with it, we have to, all the energy that went into making the tooling for that thing is lost, right?
Right.
Yeah, from a pure energy point of view.
Yeah. I mean, not just the tooling, everything, like the prototypes and the stuff that didn't sell, the colors they didn't like, so they're shredding them again. I have a saying, like I call it the daughter's test. So the idea is if a client comes to me and says, "Hey, I have an idea. Or I have a problem. I need your assistance with this, your consulting and all that stuff." And if I project myself into the future and my daughter's 13 and she comes to me, is like, "Hey, Dad, what exactly are you doing? What are the products you're doing or have you done?" And if I'm not proud of the product or this idea or the solution or making the world better for her, then I don't do it. So if let's say or maybe I can change it and make it better so I can help for that.
Yeah, you can always maybe help them figure a way of doing, some percentage less crap than it would have been otherwise. But
somebody else is going to do it, so I may as well just try to make it less crap, better quality, and all that stuff.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see where this goes. I mean, we had a young student at Pablo who actually tried to design a car that is his master's thesis for school, and it came out so cool because he made it partially out of a washing machine, partially out of a table, partially out of a lamp, all kinds of stuff came together in this thing. And what was cool was the washing machine, because it wasn't a normal washing machine, of course. It was a washing machine that already was knowing a piece of it was going to be a fender. And I had to really admire his courage on that, because when you're in school, this is a very difficult thing to do. So, but it was really cool to see what happened. And the interesting thing was he found many connections to artistic movements. Deconstructivism as a philosophy per se. But if you go back into the Cubism and a couple other art movements that existed, you'll find a lot of relationships that would be helpful for designers to recall and remember.
So you think like designers need to know more about the history in general? Always.
You have to know about it to be able to put things into perspective. If I say to you right now, car design is in a period of mannerism, for 99% of the people probably doesn't impact them at all. They're not going to understand what that means, right? I mean, there is no specific super tight definition of it anyway, but the whole idea that, mannerism implies people who are doing, at that time it was architecture usually, but it also went into art, etc., know when they're exaggerating, and they exaggerate just for the other people in their own group to know that they can do it. They know, right. When you see car design being done today and you go like, why are we taking the same thing and just exaggerating the fillet here and putting a flop line in it there and stuff like that? We're not rethinking this from any other points of view than that. Then you realize that, it's become manneristic because there's no new technologies involved. Mannerism also suffered from that. There was no new technologies to break out of. And the mindset of what is a building was fixed. The mindset of what is a car is fixed. We live in this tyranny of aerodynamics where we're convinced that aerodynamics are ethical, okay? So let's just wait until that issue is no longer an ethical issue, and then we can begin to see if cars can evolve and change.
That's going to be interesting to see when it's going to happen, if it's going to happen. But humans change.
I mean, maybe it'll start to happen when, speed laws are changed and we don't have this obsession with the fastest speed possible. I was down in Sorrento, as I said, with my family. Okay, we're driving on the coast there. I don't know, have you driven the Amalfi coast? Amalfitana? No. Please do it. Besides the fact that it's a wonderful, beautiful area. It's beyond gorgeous. It is a super tight, super windy little mountain cliffside road, okay? Full of buses and scooters, okay? And also weird cars, all right? Just chock-a-block full. And they're going everywhere. And And then suddenly, people walk in front of you, and it doesn't matter what, right? Everything happens there. And as we're driving this route, we thought, if somebody tells me that they have an autonomous driving car, I'm going to say, take it to Amalfi. Let's see it do that coast. Right? That's the acid test, right? Let's see how it goes down there. And as we were talking about it, we were thinking about Henry Ford's comment. Henry Ford had this wonderful comment. He said, if I did what people asked me, they asked for a better horse. Okay. Right. And so this is supposed to be the justification that don't listen to what people want. The entrepreneur is the genius who envisioned something that nobody can imagine, blah, blah, blah. Okay. But just imagine for a second that Henry Ford had actually done what they wanted. And he made a better horse. I mean, look at Big Dog, from the robotics guys, right? These are basically horses, right? They're better horses. Yeah. And, at the time, the big problem was horse shit in the world. And I don't know if you know this, but like the first electric vehicle in Germany, or in Berlin, I think it was an electric vehicle specifically to help the guy who went around to pick up the horse manure. That was his, that's what it was for.
So that was the imagine problem, that. Not the car.
No. So the horse shit was the problem, right? I mean, there was like piling up by the tons, right? But you know what? You could deal with horse shit. You can't deal with CO2. The planet never died from manure, but the planet can die from what those engines poop out. And
actually,
the idea
that by horse.
Yeah, funny enough, right? And maybe a better horse would have been the solution. Imagine the pace of life if, cars now had a horse pace. And there's something interesting about that, because the automobile, and we'll close maybe on this concept. To me, the secret of the car and why it became such a global phenomenon is not because of mobility. I mean, people had mobility before. You could go places. There's a lot of places you go where a car can't take you, right? And it's not necessarily because of speed. What it is, because the early ones were really slow. What it is, however, it is about the only phenomenon that you can control at your own speed. Okay, if you think about this, all horses basically go at the same speed. I mean, you can make them run for about 200 meters, and after that, they're going to go, screw you. I'm going to walk, right? If you're with your parents and you're hiking across country, you may say, I want to leave you guys behind, but I guarantee you're only going to get about 50 feet in front of them, right? If you go on a train, everybody gets there at the same time. You pay more money for your seat, but you got there at the same time as everybody else, same as a plane. The car is the only one where you say, I'm going to seriously leave everybody behind. I'm seriously going to go at my own speed, right? And if you look at all the rules and regulations that have come into place in the 100-odd years of the existence of the automobile, lots and lots and lots of those is to take that freedom away from you. Don't travel any faster than this, don't travel any faster than that, et cetera, like this, right? It's interesting, there was proposals back already in the 90s, I think, to put telemetrics into cars so that, like Formula One, they can only go through the pit stops at a certain speed, right? So the idea was, okay, we just telemetrize all automobiles, and as soon as they get inside the city limits, they can only do 50 kilometers an hour, maximum stop, right? I mean, the pushback on that was huge. It was huge, right? But no, you have to be able, you can't set your own pace, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so if the entire society's laws are trying to get rid of this one freedom anyway, why don't we call it history, get on with things, and make the world better because the car turns into horses again? I think it would be quite enjoyable.
It'll be fun, though. What an ending.
I've got to leave you with something there. Okay.
Yeah, that's great. Hey, I want to thank you so much. I mean, it's been it's a pleasure to pick your not to pick your brain, to learn about your brain.
I don't know what you learned, because I mean it kind of went everywhere.
But horse manure and
yes. Oh. Yes, we have a very in-depth studio here, this is what happens when you live out in farm country. Suddenly everything takes on a different perspective.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, including senses that you didn't think were going to be so activated, and they are.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine. I was there, actually. I was looking where it is, and we were there on vacation.
Really?
Like an hour from where you are, near Astri.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah, sure. Not so far.
Beautiful place.
So this is a wonderful area. I always tell people this is the only place where I am possible. Literally, you have to find places where you feel relaxed enough and engaged enough, and you want to help, and the people appreciate you, and so this is a wonderful area here, and the people are just special. They're brilliant.
And you know Italian now?
I spend my life learning this language, and I'll never get it right. I'm horrible at it. Don't even look at languages now. That's what the rest of the family.
You have the language of drawing. By the way, I see you also like.
Yeah, pencils. Yeah. You got to have these things.
Yep.
This is the thing.
Those ones.
I discovered these black wings. You got them too, right? I discovered those like about 5 years ago. I just live by these things now. You just grind through these things like crazy. Yeah.
They're actually beautiful to write. I never thought it's a pencil. It's like, nope, it's not a pencil.
It's not a pencil.
Black wing.
Yeah. I hate to do promotion for anybody, but if I was going to do it for somebody, I would do it for Blackwing pencils because they are really, really different. They're really seriously different. I mean, the pencil that the guys drew Bugs Bunny with, back in the 30s is back, and it's the same pencil. That's fantastic. Okay.
And, all right. Thank you very much. I'm going to link everything to the show notes. Thanks again for your time.
It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun.
And just
I hope your daughter likes our cartoons too when she grows up and gets a kick out of them too. We'll see what happens.
I'm sure. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed and found value in conversation with Roberto, it's very likely your friends and community have too. I believe that throughout meaningful conversations, genuine curiosity, and insights from experts and leaders, we can design unique brands, experiences, and products that have the potential to become iconic. Please share this episode with anyone who could benefit from these insights and framework. I would sincerely appreciate if you could also rate and review us on your favorite platform. Once again, thank you very much for your time listening and spreading the word about this podcast. Bye.